Hi, I'm Brian Lord, president of Premier Speakers Bureau. Every Friday through the summer, we're doing free virtual Fridays to help you see new speakers and learn different ways you can use virtual presentations to help your company. This week, we're excited to have Andy Andrews, who will be speaking on perspective and a mind with wings. Hailed by a New York Times reporter as someone who's quietly become one of the most influential people in America, Andy Andrews is an internationally known speaker and author. Among his best-known bestsellers are The Traveler's Gift and The Noticer. Leaders from the world's top organizations, including 4 U.S. presidents, seek him out regularly as a trusted source for unlocking extraordinary results. Here at Premier, Andy's on our Mount Rushmore of most book speakers ever in our company's history. Also, Andy's going to be doing a presentation. At the end, if there's time, he'll be doing Q&A, so definitely put some questions into Q&A, and if we have time, we'll answer them. So, Andy Andrews, thanks for joining us.
Brian, thank you, buddy. It's good to be with you, and hope you and all the Premier guys are doing great.
Thanks. Yeah, we're having a good time here, and we're excited for your message today. So, without further ado, I know we've got only about 30 minutes here. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right, here we go. We're going to talk, as you said, about perspective. And we got a very cool question. So let's begin with the story of this will be the story of a disaster, okay? Or at least the story of what seemed to be a disaster. In 2696 BC, the Emperor of China, Lei Zhu, had a problem. Something was destroying the royal mulberry trees. So he did what any brilliant man does when faced with a problem he can't handle. He turned it over to his wife. So when Empress Sailing Shi looked at the trees, she noticed a moth laying eggs on the mulberry leaves. These were eggs that within a few days hatched into caterpillars. After another few days, each of these caterpillars spun a thread that wrapped itself inside, forming this cocoon. And the royal gardeners declared the mulberry trees a total loss. They were infested. Well, a couple of weeks went by, and as her tea was being served one afternoon, the empress plucked one of the cocoons from the leaves to examine, and accidentally dropped it into the hot water that was making her tea. Slowly, the delicate thread that had formed this cocoon began to unwind. And as she stretched the thread from hand to hand and back and forth across the table, it occurred to her how long this thread was, and that perhaps this thread could be woven into cloth. It was at that moment the silk trade was born. Silk, a previously unknown cloth of extraordinary beauty and a brand new source of astonishing wealth. And it began with a kingdom's disaster. You know, sometimes it's difficult to envision a positive outcome. We're in the middle of a pandemic or any kind of a mess. We look at the landscape surrounding us and we believe our lives are just in chaos, and we feel helpless. We don't even really know where to begin to make things right sometimes. How could we imagine, and how could the emperor have ever imagined that unfathomable beauty and uncountable riches could possibly rise from the situation that seemed to signal his destruction? You see, most of us know that our thinking, how we think, determines our choices. But have you ever considered the fact that you can choose how you think? Purposefully choosing one's thoughts is the key to leaving what we call uncontrollable reality, or we don't really know what's going on. Well, controlling our thoughts, choosing how we think, is how we can take uncontrollable reality that most people accept and move it into a life of measurable results that most people can't imagine. I'm sure you've heard the word perspective, right? But have you ever considered or even examined the power of perspective? Over the years, I've learned more and have been more consistently excited about the power of perspective than about any other principle I've attempted to even understand. And because I'm always learning more about this amazing force, an explanation of perspective seems to end up somewhere in every book I write. This is true whether the form it takes is a discussion between characters in one of my novels or an examination of several facts like you and I are about to do here. Perspective can seem like an odd concept. At the very least, it's a curious one. Most people, if we asked for a definition of perspective, would tell us, well, it's how somebody sees something. You know, like seeing a glass half empty or half full. And actually, that's only half right. Here's what I mean. Your perspective is yours. You own it. No one can change it but you. You've been created with free will, so you decide how you see things. Therefore, your perspective is how you choose to see things. The glass, by the way, is neither half empty or half full. The glass just is. Okay, but by choosing how you see this situation or any situation, you're choosing how others will relate to you, whether or not they will follow your leadership, if they'll continue in a relationship with you or not, and a host of other things. This is why perspective is the only thing that can totally change the results without changing any of the facts. See, while others choose to see a situation as like the end of the road and move in a direction that makes it so, your perspective can be that, well, this is the beginning of a whole new road, and move in a totally opposite direction where things become better than you'd ever imagined. Others may decide, well, this is the worst thing that could have possibly happened. And of course, you're free to believe that as well. But you're also free to choose a different perspective. Is it the worst thing that could have happened? Or is it the best thing that could have happened? Half empty, half full. Your perspective will determine what you do at this point. Therefore, if you sit down and collapse and complain and do nothing, your perspective was right on target. It really was the worst thing that could have happened. On the other hand, you can get up, shake it off, smile. You can learn lessons, change gears, be grateful for the opportunity to know for sure what doesn't work. You can use extra time to read, to pray, to be quiet, to think. And then you can allow all the new understanding you have gained to coalesce into plans of certainty for an astonishing future that you otherwise would never have known. And at that point, you'll realize that your perspective was right on target. It really was the best thing that could have happened. See, perspective can be more important than answers. In a time of crisis, most people are so desperate for an answer that they'll just shove one into the situation without the proper regard for its timing or its value. And as you navigate your life, you need to be on guard. We all need to be on guard for that gap between what will work and what is the best. Choices and decisions made by intelligent people, no matter when they're made, almost always gain a result that works in some way and to some degree. The best answers to a situation, however, often contain an element of timing. So in addition, I would really, urge you to notice how often intelligent people assemble facts and then make their decisions based upon those facts. Actually, it's what most people do because it produces results that work, at least in some way and to some degree, right? But contrast that method with how wise people deal with the same types of situations. You'll quickly notice that they also assemble the current information. But instead of making a decision based solely on the facts, wise people first apply a healthy dose of perspective to the facts. That perspective allows them to choose the best course of action and set everything in motion at the very best time. Perspective about a situation creates calm. Calm leads to clear thinking. Clear thinking yields ideas and discerns the difference between problem areas and opportunities. Clear thinking pinpoints perfect timing. And in turn, all this leads to the answer you can be confident is the best that can be employed. Perspective is such a little thing, but it's the only thing that can dramatically change the results without changing any of the facts. So, here is the question of the day. Does a mind have wings? And the answer is yes, but only if we choose a proper perspective. And that is especially true when we are choosing the perspective with which we view what is possible in our own lives and our own businesses. Are you familiar with the word Beamanesque? It's an actual word, and it's actually included in several dictionaries. That the word is not in all dictionaries is due to the fact that until October 18th, 1968, there would have been no reason to add an esque to the name Beeman. On that date, a young man named Bob Beamon was verging on immortality in the world of track and field. Not that anybody suspected it. Okay, the results he was posting in his regular life were excellent, though not excellent enough to suspect the greatness that was about to come. He was originally from Queens, New York, and he competed in only one track and field event, the long jump. Beeman was headed to the Olympic Games in Mexico City, and he was considered a possible medal contender. Unfortunately, the 2 days of competition for which he had physically prepared his entire life did not begin well. He jumped poorly on both days and it was close to elimination in the preliminaries, but he kind of, kept after it, and he almost missed the finals completely and didn't qualify until his third and last attempt. Now, in the finals with Beeman on that second day were the two previous long jump gold medalists, American Ralph Boston from Laurel, Mississippi, who had won the event in 1960, and Lynn Davies from Great Britain, the winner in 1964. Rounding out this field of competitors was Igor Turovasyan from the Soviet Olympic team. Twice he had won Olympic bronze medals. At these Olympics, however, it was Turovasyan who came into Mexico City as the favorite to win gold because he was the current holder of the world record in long jump. Now, a year earlier at an international meet held in the same Mexico City stadium, this Soviet had set the record against these three competitors, Boston, Davies, and Beeman. And now the Soviet was facing the same three on the world's biggest stage, the finals of the Olympic Games. In a century of competition prior to those 1968 Olympics, the world record in long jump had only been broken 13 times in a century. The increase when the record was broken averaged only 2.5 inches. On the day of the Olympic finals, the world record still stood where the Soviet had placed it the year before, 27 feet, 4 3/4 inches. So, Davies, Great Britain, he led out, followed by Boston, then Turovasyan. The first three competitors' attempts landed each of them just shy of the 27-foot mark. Having done what they could, the three turned to watch the young American, Bob Beeman. Now, he had fouled on his first two attempts. And so on impulse, Ralph Boston moved quickly to Beeman's side. He considered himself a mentor to the younger athlete, and Boston spoke directly into Beeman's left ear. Years passed before either man described the momentary one-sided conversation, but in that instant, Bob Beeman was transformed by an almost supernatural focus he had never before experienced. Later, he would reflect on that moment and the words of his friend by saying that physically, I was as close to perfect as I ever got. Mentally, and I didn't know this, of course, I was not nearly so strong. But as I stood there, scared, about to approach the track for my last jump, Ralph spoke to me. This is what Bob Beeman said. He said, his words took shape in my head. In essence, Boston's words became Beeman's perspective about himself. Archival footage of these seconds, they show this stoic Beeman staring straight ahead as Boston just urgently speaks to him. And quickly, the older athlete whispered, "Take off early. You have room to spare. Give him the 2 inches on the front. You'll take 2 feet when you land. Your legs have never been as strong as they are right now. At this moment, your body weighs nothing. Your mind has wings. Use them. Fly up. Fly out." Boston backed away, and Beeman moved into position. For 20 seconds, he stared down the track. Rocking back only once, he shot forward with his hand up and his arms pumping like pistons. Astonishingly, it took only 6 seconds for Beeman to take 19 hard strides, leap to a height of more than 6 feet into the air, his legs continuing to wheel forward in that bicycling running motion, and he landed in the sandpit at the end of the track. But there was a problem. See, the issue was not with Beeman's takeoff. That's the most likely foul for long jumpers who often overstep the starting board. He also landed cleanly inside the boundaries of the sandpit. The predicament was caused by where the American had landed in the sandpit. The optical device that had been installed by the IOC to measure distances failed to measure his leap because Bob Beeman had jumped over and well beyond the optical device. For almost 20 minutes, the entire stadium watched, waiting impatiently as the Olympic judges located an old-fashioned tape measure in order to make an official ruling about what had just occurred. When the distance was finally posted, there was a stunned silence on the field and in the stadium. Within seconds, Beeman fell to his knees, his face in his hands, and there began a roar from the crowd that literally shook the building. Bob Beeman had jumped 29 feet, 2.5 inches, almost 2 feet beyond what any person had ever done. Beeman didn't simply set a record, he shattered it. The Olympic record still stands today, and most agree with the assessment made on the spot by Lynn Davies, who was the defending Olympic gold medalist. He said, "Bob, you have destroyed the event." The jump, as it came to be known, was named by Sports Illustrated magazine as one of the 5 greatest sports moments of the 20th century. ESPN named it the most amazing Olympic performance in history. And as you already know, that one jump by the young man from New York so stunned the world that it created its own word. And Beemanesque is now in dictionaries around the world. It's an adjective, meaning a result so far superior to anything accomplished before, it's overwhelming. It is interesting that Bob Beeman never again matched the results of that legendary jump. It had captivated the world. Several times during the years following that day, Beeman returned to the same Mexico City stadium. And there he competed at the same temperature during the same time of the year. He had done it the first time. Beeman's attempts to equal or surpass 29 feet, 2.5 inches in that stadium were made in the same light atmosphere as before. The city was still situated at 7,382 feet. And knowing that track and field records are not official if they're wind aided by a breeze higher than 2 miles per hour, every jump Beeman took in that stadium during the rest of his career was made with the knowledge that he was facing wind speed and direction that was virtually identical to that of the day his miracle had taken place. So more than once, he was even surrounded by the same competitors. He wore the same colors, even the same shoes. But his results never approached what he had done the day he had been urged to give him 2 inches on the front, take 2 feet when you land. Why? Well, within a year, that question was effectively answered by experts who were filing their reports from around the world. It had become increasingly obvious, they said, that Bob Beeman had been kissed by fate the day he jumped 29 2.5. His otherworldly leap, for whatever reason, they said, had simply been a gift from God, a singular event, akin to being the only person in the history of mankind to actually see and lay hands on a unicorn. Beeman's unearthly performance, these people, these experts assured everybody, was lightning in a bottle. It was caught once for a single instant before vanishing forever. Vanishing forever? That's what they said. And because the conclusions those experts came to at that time were true and still are, this is where reality gets very interesting. It would seem that the specific question asked by the experts at that time was an easy one to answer. It's a question that in one form or another has existed in our collective mental attitude since way before the afternoon of October 18th, 1968. The question was asked out loud and loudly. It was posed by the experts. It was a simple and direct, can Beeman do it again? Curiously, the answer, again, courtesy of the experts, began to form almost immediately after Beeman failed at his first attempt to do it again. With each subsequent failure and an eventual injury, the experts became more convinced that their answer was correct. No, they said, he cannot do it again. See, magazines and newspapers at the same time reflected the certainty of their experts. Bob Beeman, no doubt, was at least aware of these articles, right? And the verdict that was in about his future, knowing that the quality of one's answers is usually determined by the quality of our questions. It's unfortunate that nobody, at least no one publicly, asked anything that might have led this young man participating in an individual sport the opportunity to gather his own perspective about himself. Because with the proper perspective, Bob Beeman could have come to a different conclusion. So more than a half century after the fact, why don't you and I quickly examine the question that was asked, the one that guided Beeman's thoughts, and let's consider a question that was never asked. Here we go. When "Can Beeman do it again?" was first asked, was there anyone who recognized the damage being done by this horrible question? Let me explain. Does a mind have wings? Absolutely. Unfortunately, a mind also possesses an anchor, and either can be deployed at the drop of a thought. A mind with wings fully extended creates this flurry of appropriate action leading to positive results. These results are identifiable and often described as momentum. On the other hand, when a mind folds its wings and lowers its anchor, the diminishing results that occur are also identifiable and often described as a loss of momentum. Is momentum important? Yeah. If you're an athlete, Yes, if you're in business. Yes, if you intend to steer your family in a positive direction. And yes, in fact, if you have any kind of bandwagon and want to get anybody else on it. The effects of momentum are easy to predict if one understands what the power of momentum actually does for a person. Incidentally, what momentum does for a person is exactly what it does for a team, a family, an organization, or a business. When we have momentum, the results of any action are greater than reality says they should be. Conversely, when one lacks momentum, the results of any action is less than reality says they should be. In other words, with momentum, your team looks better than they really are. And without momentum, they look worse than they really are. Is it possible that Bob Beamon actually lost momentum quickly after pulling off what is still considered the most stunning performance in track and field history? Yeah, it's not only possible, it's exactly what happened. How did it happen? You wonder. Let's go back to the horrible question. And as we think through it, remember that the quality of our answers is usually determined by the quality of our questions. Why then was "can Beamon do it again" the wrong question? For the shockingly simple reason that no was an incorrect answer. It was an answer that released an anchor in Bob Beamon's mind. If the answer had been "will Beamon do it again?" and the answer no from any source would have been perfectly acceptable because it would have been an opinion, a guess, with no more power to sway Beamon's mind than your average fairy tale. But the question was, can Beamon do it again? And the answer to that should have been a resounding yes, he can do it again because he had already done it. Bob Beamon was obviously physically capable of leaping 29 feet, 2.5 inches. Obviously? Yeah, because he actually did exactly that. So if Beamon was physically capable of jumping that distance once, what was to stop him from doing it again? It couldn't have been a physical barrier. He had already proven to the world and to himself that his body was capable. Therefore, the only possible barrier was one created in his own mind. On an October afternoon in 1968, there was a moment in a stadium full of screaming people that Bob Beamon listened to one voice. It was the voice of his mentor, Ralph Boston's words. It filled him with proper perspective, and it gave wings to Beamon's mind, and those wings propelled his body through the air to a mark well beyond what any other athlete had ever imagined. Soon after his triumph in Mexico City, however, quite the opposite phenomenon took place. Instead of listening to the voice that told him what was possible, Beamon's mind was besieged by the voices of experts declaring that what he had already done was impossible. In effect, while Bob Beamon's mind prompted his body to perform to its potential on that one particular day when he was 22 years old, on every other day during the rest of his life, that very same mind told exactly the same body that the record jump, the jump the body had already done, was a freak of nature, a fluke, an outlier. In essence, Bob Beamon told Bob Beamon that Bob Beamon would never be able to jump that far again. And he never did. As we close, know that the point of this message is not Bob Beamon's past. Today, our point is your future. Yeah, Bob Beamon's story is encouraging, perhaps even thrilling. But as we have determined, it also exists as a cautionary tale. Yes, your mind has wings, but it also possesses an anchor. And because for most of us, the anchor is our mental default, that's why we must actively choose our perspective. Remember that you can choose how you think. So choose wings for your mind. In doing so, you will at the same time choose your future, and it will be a future that most can only imagine. Brian?
Andy, thank you for sharing that message. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, buddy. Honored to be here with you.
Yeah, well, we have a couple questions for you, and
Okay.
realizing a wise man once said that the quality of questions determines the quality of answers. We'll give it a shot here. No pressure, no pressure on us and our listeners who might have some questions here. So, anyway, first one, what made you have such an interest in perspective?
I think if you're familiar with my story, which a lot of people might not be, after my parents died when I was 19, my mom died of cancer, my dad was killed in a car accident, and crazy time in my life. And I've always had the ability to take a bad situation and make it worse. And I did. And I ended up literally homeless before that was even a word. At that time, nobody was talking about homeless people, but I was living under a pier and on the Gulf Coast, in and out of people's garages. And so I remember thinking, man, is life just a lottery ticket? Or is there something that you can do? And I read biographies and think, are these people born this way? Or did they do something? Because if they were born that way, if I decided they were born that way, then I knew I was out of luck. But if it was something they did, what did they do? And how long did it take them to do it? And I began to understand that how I thought determined my choices, but I could also choose how I thought. I could choose how I thought by choosing who I was around, or choosing what I read, or choosing what I watched or listened to, or perhaps more important, I could choose who I would not be around, or what I would not read, or what I would not watch or listen to. And so that became a huge thing to me. And the more I began to understand it, the more I began to harness it. And the more I began to harness it, the more I began to understand it. And I'm still kind of on that journey.
Great. All right. Now, next question from Melissa Bilka. What other resources do you recommend to learn more about the power of perspective?
Well, Melissa, I hate, it's just like, I hate to promote myself, but
set up
I get
it right there.
Yeah, that's a setup. I ran into an old guy when I was living on the pier, and we called him the Noticer. Okay, because he said when God was passing out talents, I didn't get the cool ones. I can't run fast, I can't sing great, but I noticed little things that make a difference in other people's lives. And he's the guy who really kind of started me on this process of perspective. In fact, in what I just did, I quoted him because he would say, perspective is more important than answers. Perspective brings calm. Calm leads to clear thinking. Clear thinking yields ideas. And from ideas, we get those moves at the perfect time. And so I ended up writing a book called The Noticer. And the subtitle is about the power of perspective and how he would look at certain things. One day we were out and he brought sardines, which I hate to this day, and Vienna sausages. But I was hungry. I liked him. I was eating them. And he said, "What are you eating?" And I said, "Sardines and Vienna sausages." And he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "In the sand." And he said, see, the power of perspective. He said, because I'm eating a totally different thing in a totally different place. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You're eating sardines and Vienna sausages in the sand. I'm eating surf and turf with an ocean view." And now I won't tell you, Melissa, that he didn't irritate me a lot. Okay. But I wrote that book called The Noticer. And then as I began to understand more about him and that time, I wrote The Noticer Returns. And September 8th, I have the third book in that series coming out called Just Jones. That's what we called him, by the way. He would say, not Mr. Jones, just Jones.
Great. Well, Andy, thank you so much for sharing your message on perspective and a mind with wings. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, buddy. Honored as always to be a part of what you guys do.
Thank you. Now for next week on Free Virtual Friday, we'll have customer experience expert Jean Bliss as she speaks on forging our path forward, guiding leaders on a path to customer-driven growth. You can actually go to premierspeakers.com/free right now to register. Thanks again to everyone for joining us for this free virtual Friday.